Very good afternoon to all. We are moving to our next session. At the outset, let me thank Dr. Sajesh and the whole team for giving us an opportunity to chair this session, important session. And we have a session on septic coagulopathy in elderly, and the speaker is Dr. Prabha Adhikari, Professor and HOD of Geriatric Medicine, visiting consultant, general physician, Yonapaya Medical College, Mangalore, and she was former HOD Medicine, KMC Mangalore, Professor of Geriatric Medicine, and she has several publications and chapters written in the books, and guided 16 PhDs. Over to Dr. Prabha Adhikari.
I'm starting off with this particular patient, 75-year-old male, came with low-grade fever, altered sensorium, septic shock, acute kidney injury, respiratory distress needing 15 liters of oxygen, LFT was deranged, D-dimer was very high, his PT-INR was 1.1, and he had a platelet count of more than 1 lakh. So his SOFA score was more than 11, and as per the SOFA score, the chances of death are 90%. So we come across such patients very often in our clinical practice, and if they are frail, many of the physicians will declare them as not fit for any treatment and give a very grave prognosis. So I'll come to that case towards my end of the talk. So today I'm going to talk about septic coagulopathy. Definition, pathophysiology, diagnosis, investigations, and management. So all of you know that sepsis cases are increasing, and we have a death of almost 25%. Despite all the most modern treatment and the most modern setup, outcome is poor with 25% mortality. And aging population, of course, are the worst affected. And this is the definition. I think everybody knows it. Life-threatening organ dysfunction caused by a dysregulated host response to infection. And organ dysfunction is defined as an acute increase of 2 or more points in the sequential organ failure assessment score, that is SOFA score. So it's very important that we do this course at casualty itself so that we know what the prognosis is and how aggressively the patient should be treated. As the patient walks in, we can't be doing the proper SOFA score, but we can easily do this quick SOFA score, which is just 2 of the 3, which is very, very common in geriatric population. That is systolic BP of less than 100, respiratory rate more than 22, altered mental status with a probable history of infection. This is very easy and we can do at the casualty itself. And this is the SOFA criteria, which is easily available, and we can place our patients in different score category and add up the scores. You can see here the coagulopathy, which is very common in sepsis, was not given so much of importance earlier until we had COVID. Once we had COVID, we all got aware that there is coagulation which can affect the patient. Of course, we knew about DIC and we knew that nothing much we can do in DIC. But we did not know about this category of septic coagulopathy, which is not yet progressed to DIC. So earlier, the only parameter that we took for coagulopathy was platelet count, and anybody with less than 1.5 lakhs or less platelet count was considered as having probably septic coagulopathy. But if you look at the pathophysiology of sepsis, all of us know that it's a systemic inflammatory response. So inflammatory cytokines are definitely going to be high. But the thrombosis part, which has been there in the pathophysiology with microvascular thrombosis, has been neglected, and the dysregulated coagulation part is also neglected. Everybody knows that Sepsis can increase the risk of deep vein thrombosis because these patients are immobile, altered sensorium, etc. And there was some case for giving prophylactic heparin. So, sepsis pathology starts with inflammation but ends with coagulation. And when coagulation happens, it's not only just deep vein thrombosis, it can worsen the existing organ dysfunction which was due to inflammation. It can cause ACS, it can cause cerebrovascular accidents. And that's how our elderly patients come to us. There is a small history of a viral infection like influenza or urosepsis, but they come to us with a stroke or ACS. When I looked at the literature of influenza, ACS as well as cerebrovascular accident was considered as a very high end result of influenza, not only in older patients but younger patients also. In fact, people aged less than 45 were at a higher risk of developing coronary events and cerebrovascular events, and that is not known to most of the physicians. When I looked at sepsis, if there is a patient with sepsis, his chances of developing cerebrovascular accident is around 28 times more. That odds ratio is 28 times more. You can imagine the risk of stroke that a person will have after sepsis. And this is due to coagulation. So how do we diagnose this? The simplest investigations that we can do in our lab, platelet count and prothrombin time, everybody can do. And we have a scoring method using just platelet count and prothrombin time. And we have a scoring method using platelet count, D-dimer and prothrombin time. And we can use advanced investigations like fibrinogen and fibrin degradation products if facilities are available. But we don't have to cry and say, I can't do this, I can't do this. We can diagnose septic coagulopathy with just platelet count, PT and SOFA score, which can be done in any setting, anywhere. So, under septic coagulopathy, there are two things. One is sepsis-induced coagulopathy, and the second one is disseminated intravascular coagulation. While DIC was known to us, a stage before that, or I won't say it is always a stage before that because pathophysiology of the two conditions differ. Sepsis-induced coagulopathy was not very popularly known earlier. As I said, there is difference in pathology. In sepsis-induced coagulopathy, it is decreased fibrinolysis caused by overproduction of plasminogen activator inhibitor, leading to hypercoagulation. We did a small study on 25 elderly patients with sepsis, and we found the same finding that they have decreased fibrinolysis, and it's not just consumption coagulopathy that you get in DIC. So, International Society on Thrombosis and Hemostasis has given this easy score for us, where it does not include D-dimer, and simple platelet count and PT INR and SOFA score. If the total score is 4 or more, then we can call it as sepsis-induced coagulopathy. So you can see here, suppose I have a patient with platelet count of less than 100,000 and a SOFA score of more than 2, I have a case of sepsis-induced coagulopathy. But this doesn't exclude whether patient has DIC or not. So after this step, we have to go to the next step. This is an old classification. However, this clearly separates sepsis-induced coagulopathy from DIC. So you can see here, you have platelet count, D-dimer, prothrombin time, fibrinogen, if available, you can use it, SOFA score. So even without fibrinogen, we can diagnose sepsis-induced coagulopathy with this. When the score is 4 or 4, it is sepsis-induced coagulopathy. When the score is more than 5, it is DIC. When it's DIC, we are very scared to use anticoagulants. When it's just sepsis-induced coagulopathy, we can safely use anticoagulant. So here I have a two-step, that's what I said. Sepsis with thrombocytopenia, sepsis-induced coagulopathy diagnosis is made. You have an alternate diagnosis because some of these coagulopathies can be secondary to conditions like cancer. Approach is different. When you know that it is due to sepsis, and if it is a DIC score, that is score of more than 5, then the diagnosis becomes DIC, and if its score is 4, it becomes sepsis-induced coagulopathy. So let us see the evidence for anticoagulation in these patients. So a large database of a retrospective study showed that using heparin either as continuous infusion or as low molecular weight heparin, there was significant reduction in 28-day mortality with a hazard ratio of 0.32 and in-hospital mortality, and without an adverse event of gastrointestinal hemorrhage. And all of us are aware that COVID-19 studies, especially Hep COVID randomized controlled clinical trials, showed that whenever we had a COVID patient with increased D-dimer concentration or SIC scores of 4, use of heparin, especially low molecular weight heparin, was reduced the 28-day mortality. That is around 24% difference in the mortality, 40% versus 64.2%. So after COVID, we revised our care for sepsis patients, and we became bolder because those of us who have treated COVID, we were using heparin as a standard care. That was there in our protocol, and we were using it, and we did see better outcomes in clinical practice also. So heparin can be safely used, but in older patients, we have problems because patients can have a higher risk of bleeding, and you need to use the Hasbled score before we embark on the therapeutic doses of heparin. We also have to look at their GFR because heparin given in full dose can produce hemorrhage in patients who have lower GFR. So these are two conditions that we have to do before we use therapeutic heparin. The second treatment that has changed the outcome is antithrombin, and we don't have antithrombin, but the workers who compared 4 different anticoagulants and a placebo found that antithrombin had 5-fold resolution of even DIC when compared to other placebo. The third drug that has been used is thrombomodulin, and a SCARLET trial suggests that patients who had features of sepsis-associated coagulopathy at the time of administration, who received the single dose of thrombomodulin, but who did not receive heparin, had great benefits. However, it is still not come into practice. What about transfusions in patients with sepsis-associated coagulopathy and DIC? Some of the RCTs, but open-label RCT, especially in children, have shown that low-dose heparin, tranexamic acid, along with fresh frozen plasma, have shown better outcomes, but this has not been shown in adult population or geriatric population. Therapeutic plasma exchange outperformed heparin therapy in a randomized controlled trial. So what do we take home from these trials and our experience? If you look at the survival sepsis guidelines for anticoagulation, it is there for prophylactic anticoagulation. So definitely we can use the survival sepsis guidelines and protect all our elderly with sepsis with a prophylactic heparin, and only when it's contraindicated, we resort to mechanical prophylaxis using mechanical devices. So why is heparin doing well in these cases? Because heparin not only is beneficial as an anticoagulant, it has anti-inflammatory effect, anti-complement activation, because it's complement activation which leads to coagulation, and it modulates different proteases. So pillars of treatment of sepsis, all of us know: antibiotics, IV fluids, and rapid resuscitation in case of septic shock, inotropes in septic shock, oxygenation, and prophylactic heparin. But everybody is very scared to use a prophylactic heparin in elderly patients, and that's how we lose that benefit in sepsis. Less evidence, but however, we use therapeutic heparin under following conditions. Sepsis associated atrial fibrillation is very common in elderly, and when you have atrial fibrillation, you can use the existing guidelines for heparin therapy, and we can use it. We have sepsis associated acute coronary syndromes, which we see in our practice. We can definitely use 5 days of heparin whenever you have elevated troponins, ECG changes suggestive of an acute coronary event. We can definitely use heparin. So when we don't have these indications, how do we use heparin? Platelet normal, PT-INR normal, SOFA score 2, D-dimer moderately elevated or severely elevated with SOFA 1. We can definitely use heparin. We have done it and our outcomes have been pretty good. In a study of 50 cases, our survival was 80%. That means 40 survived despite having very bad SOFA scores. So that means 20% mortality, which is much lower than the world record of mortality. So we have also noticed that septic coagulopathy leads to small vessel strokes, which will result in functional decline, cognitive decline, and impaired mobility, and leads to dependency also. So it is good to use at least therapeutic heparin, prophylactic heparin. So let us come back to the case. This particular patient received all the treatment under sepsis, survival sepsis guidelines, including heparin. We could only give him a prophylactic dose, but in view of his RFT, which was deranged, even that prophylactic dose was beneficial and he came out. So we had several such stories where SOFA score of more than 11 have survived, and we attribute it to rapid management as per survival sepsis guidelines and giving heparin. Of course, we haven't conducted a randomized controlled trial. So sepsis outcomes have not improved despite modern treatment. The golden hour resuscitation and empirical antibiotic is the only thing that has been recommended. Prophylactic heparin is recommended, but it is less used, and therapeutic heparin can be used cautiously when we have a score of 4. Thank you. I thank all my PGs and department who have helped us in managing sepsis and have become bold enough to use heparin when indicated. Thank you.
Thank you, madam, for the excellent presentation. Now the case is open for discussion.
Good afternoon, ma'am. So heparin is also being used along with the certain antibiotics, higher antibiotics in ICU setting. Is there any rationale behind? Because there was a warning from the Drug Control Authority that these antibiotic preparations which is being used doesn't have any rationale behind. So use it with a caution. So is there any rationale? Because it eases the penetrability.
I don't think there is any recommendation to use simply heparin because you are giving higher antibiotics.
Along with the,
yeah,
it increases the penetrability of antibiotic.
No. I don't think we should be bold enough to follow that. Because a patient may be going in for DIC.
Correct.
And we add that such a patient will be usually going in for DIC. It could be dangerous.
Preparation with meropenem, which came with heparin.
I don't think we are bold enough to do that.
Thank you, ma'am.
Madam, sepsis-induced
coagulopathy or terminal patient, when there is no other hope of recovering the patient from the situation, there's a regime called the Paul Muric regime. Some of the physicians may be knowing it, in which they have suggested hydrocortisone, high dose hydrocortisone for 5 days, vitamin C, parenteral for 5 days, and also thiamine
Yes,
intravenous.
yes.
This regime we have tried in our medical college. We could save patients because there was no other thing other than to leave the patient for death.
Yeah.
So
We are using, especially in older people, we are using steroids also
Oh.
because as per the sepsis guidelines, septic shock not improving with noradrenaline. Most of them don't respond to noradrenaline because they already have autonomic failure and other things. Steroids are recommended. Or if they have pneumonia, bronchospasm, COPD patients, definitely will use steroids. We will find some indication for steroids and we do use, but we use very short term. We don't use beyond 2 to 3 days.
This is a 5 days regime. It's
Yeah.
called a Paul Muric regime. We have tried it and we could
Yeah.
save some of our
Yeah,
patients.
like COVID regime, we are using what was recommended for COVID, dexamethasone 6 mg once a day. We have found very good outcomes with that also. When CRP is very high, we have used it for 2 to 3 days. Although for COVID, the recommendation was 5 days. These are diabetic patients, they'll go out of control, then it becomes difficult. But guidelines don't permit us to use steroids, but all critical care physicians use steroids. So we use for a short term, but that's not there, not yet come in the guideline.
Thank you, Dr. Prabha, for the excellent presentation. That too from a knowledge which you have found from the COVID. I would like to say something interesting about which knowledge we had or the finding we had during COVID. Because usually when you are sitting in the OPD or in the IP, the elderly population is usually up 70 or 75 and all that. During the COVID time, there were an increase in number of people above 80 years. We had in our hospital a person more than 100 years. There were 5 people who were otherwise usually healthy than the younger generation, and there were 5 from above 100 years. Then many patients were there the 80 years. So that means that the assessment we do or what we see may not be the real population of the elderly people. Like the old are many. They may be sitting at home and they are reluctant to come to the hospital for illness and all that. So that is a phenomenon which we were wondering from where all these people are coming in. So a lot of people were there more than 80 years of age. So from this thought, are you planning for any further studies or randomized trials and all that?
Yeah, we are planning for a study. Actually, we have done a basic pathophysiology study. Based on that, we want to now do a clinical study.
Thank you, madam, because of the positive time, we are closing the session. Thank you, organizing committee, for giving us the opportunity for this. Thank you once again.
Thank you, ma'am.